the word to the last speaker before the pause and before the debate. Stefan, the floor is yours. Normally, you can share the screen like everybody. Great to see you.
Many thanks, Didier. No, I don't need to share the stream. I'll just sort of give a presentation like this. And I will basically address exactly that issue, what a proper democratic usage of digital data would have to mean. And sort of whoever thinks sort of the reflections I can sketch here within 15 minutes are not sufficient can check out my forthcoming book, We Have Always Been Cyborgs. That will be out in 1 month or two. And with some wonderful endorsements, both by a critical posthumanist, Catherine Hales, as well as by a libertarian bioethicist like Julian Huxley. So in a nutshell, what I'll present is when choosing between health and privacy, we should go for freedom, or why Harari was wrong. Harari claims in his opinion piece from last year, The World After the Coronavirus, I quote, asking people to choose between privacy and health is in fact the very root of the problem. Because this is a false choice. We can and should enjoy both privacy and health. We can choose to protect our health and stop the coronavirus epidemic, not by instituting totalitarian surveillance regimes, but rather by empowering citizens, unquote. Harari is wrong. To promote health effectively, large amounts of data are needed. And this is, I guess, come out in the various other talks we just heard as well. The more data we can use, the more reliable are the resulting correlations of health and our behavior, genes, and external influences. Such data are also needed for innovation, scientific research, and policymaking. All these procedures are of central importance for a country. Extensive amounts of data are needed for the economic, health, and social prosperity of a country. However, it must be ensured that the data are used democratically, and this is a challenge. Such a structure does not yet exist at present. In the USA, data are primarily collected by large companies. This turns them into quasi-political actors, which has the potential to undermine the foundations of free democratic societies. In China, on the other hand, data are collected by the government on the basis of values and norms that cannot be reconciled with the achievements of the Enlightenment. The structures currently prevailing in Europe undermine our strongest interests. Here, the focus is on data protection. The possibility of achieving an extensive collection of digital data at a political level, as well, is being practically undermined. However, this also means that we are losing the opportunity to use these digital data for democratic interests and to promote our health. Collecting data is particularly important when it comes to the issue of health. If we have to choose between health and privacy, we should choose health, because the majority of citizens identify an increased health span with a better quality of life. We have no reason for being sad about giving up privacy, as I will show. We shouldn't cherish privacy, but we should cherish freedom. We can have health and freedom, but not health and privacy. Why do we think that we need privacy? There are two main theories that explain this: the property theory and the sanction theory, and they are not mutually exclusive. According to the property theory, data are our intellectual property and therefore an extension of ourselves. If governments or anybody else takes away our data, they seem to expropriate us. But is this necessarily the case? If data are our property that we can exchange for other goods in our favor, such as our health insurance, then this is not an expropriation. Having a universal public health insurance is an enormously important achievement, but keeping the system alive demands huge financial inflows. Using our data to partially compensate for this service is in the interest of a society. Furthermore, the sanction theory states that we fear that the data being collected, stored, and used by a government could be the grounding for sanctions against us. We fear sanctions. However, sanctions are also necessary. If a murder of an innocent child gets caught and sanctioned, this is just and widely accepted by the society. We merely don't wish to be sanctioned for acts which should not be sanctioned, neither morally, institutionally, nor legally. This is a crucial issue. The fear of such sanctions is also the reason why we fear our personal data being stored in one place. But how can these fears be dispelled? First, we need to reduce the possibility of access to the data by humans because the risk of abuse is too high. Data access should primarily be granted to algorithms. Only in specialized circumstances, humans should have the right to access the data. This is a significant challenge which permanently needs to be dealt with conclusively. Second, we need to become much more open and pluralistic. Only acts ought to be punished when direct harm is being done to another person. Currently, this is far from being the case in many parts of the world, even in some of the most developed countries. Third, we should promote e-governments to make decisions making processes concerning our data more transparent. A lot more obviously would have to be said on this issue, from the need to establish a well-functioning, fast-operating infrastructure to the need to realize reliable algorithms to reduce the need of human intervention. The regulation, I suggest, has the advantage that the digital data are also being used to at least partially pay for a universal public healthcare system, which is an enormous achievement. It takes seriously the relevance of data collection for innovations, scientific research, and policymaking. It's in the interest of the people as well as of the government to be able to collect and use digital data, to guarantee that an enormous plurality of different lifestyles can be embraced in a society which, while a highly efficient universal healthcare system is available, we need a democratic usage of our digital data. And this approach seems a promising initial step for developing appropriate social, legal, and political structures for realizing a proper democratic usage of our digital data. So, if a government stores all digital data and uses them, then it can be argued that expropriation occurs, which would be an illegitimate harm being done to persons. However, this needs to be rethought. It would not be an expropriation of our digital data, that is our intellectual property, if the data were used in a democratic manner and were used such that it helps to finance our interests. And here the health comes in. The majority of citizens identifying increased health span with a higher quality of life. And this matters politically. This is the reason why universal public health insurance is politically justified. Yet the costs for upholding such a system are enormous. Even in Europe, the differences concerning the quality of universal public healthcare systems are enormous. Healthcare is incredibly expensive, yet it's in our interest. And if the digital data were used to at least partially cover the costs of universal public health insurance, it would not be an expropriation, but rather the payment for a service which is widely requested. Most people identify an increased health span with an increased quality of life. As having a health insurance is a widely shared human interest, it's a duty of the government to provide people with it. Developing a new drug is risky and costs a lot of money. If a pharmaceutical company has successfully developed a new drug and has patented the invention, they have got the exclusive right for 20 years to realize a financial gain out of their patent. They can charge whatever amount of money they want for the drug developed. This makes sense as they took the risk and financial burden to develop the drug in the first place, and not many drugs get finally approved. However, data are needed for developing new drugs. Where do they get the data from? So in a political regime with such a surveillance system, such as a collecting of digital data system, the government stores and projects available personalized data because it would have to be personalized data for it to be, efficient. And they can pass depersonalized versions of the data on to others, like a drug company. In this way, certain limitations can be imposed on the developing company. The pharmaceutical company can no longer charge whatever is in their interest, as a drug was developed on the basis of data provided by the people and collected by a political institution. The data were made accessible on the basis of a contract with the government, which limits the rights of the drug company. In this way, it can be guaranteed that newly developed drugs can be made available to the people on a financially more accessible basis, or in a way that it can be included in the universal health insurance. Hence, storing and using the data by the government is not an or doesn't have to be an expropriation, but in this case, it would be a payment. We support the payment of a universal health insurance by means of our personalized data, digital data, which gets collected. And this is what I mean by democratizing the use of collecting data. Nevertheless, it can be objected that even though I permanently stress the relevance also of the norm of negative freedom, which is fundamental for me, a wonderful achievement, which must never be underestimated, and the need to promote plurality further, doesn't my claim that we all need to embrace total surveillance not undermine the relevance of freedom? It's clear that it does. No society can have absolute freedom. Sanctions for certain behavior are necessary. If someone kills an innocent person, the murderer needs to get punished. Can a certain type of bodily harm become legally obligatory? Vaccinations are the best example. Still, one can wonder whether it wouldn't be more in tune with the norm of freedom if a dropping out option existed. That means if it was possible not to be forced to pay for the universal health insurance by means of permanent collection of digital data. So if citizens prefer to pay for the universal health insurance with money rather than with personalized data, should a social liberal democratic society not offer their citizens this option? Negative freedom is a wonderful achievement. Maybe this option should be available. However, what would be the consequences? How much would it cost to pay for the universal health insurance with money rather than with personalized data? If it doesn't cost much, then many citizens might choose this option, which would undermine the goal of collecting the data in the first place. And the dropping out option would get more expensive. In this case, if it got more expensive, then only very few rich citizens could afford it. Does this not undermine freedom too? If the power difference between the rich and the poor gets too big, then the economically weaker ones are under an illegitimate pressure. Hence, freedom undermines itself if one provided citizens with a dropping out option. Hence, even though it initially seems to be more in tune with negative freedom if a dropping out option was legally provided, given further reflections, it seems more likely that in this case, freedom undermines itself. In any case, further reflections and practical evidence are needed for further judgments on this issue. So it was obviously not my intention here to develop a fully worked out political system involving algorithmic data processing here. I don't even think any one answer can ever be fully convincing and appropriate for all systems. I merely wish to show that embracing collection of digital data and the loss of privacy, which goes along with it, that it can be in tune with the affirmation of the norm of negative freedom, and negative freedom being the absence of constraint. And that it's in our interest to implement such structures, as this seems to be the most promising way of using digital data in a proper democratic manner, and not in a way that it primarily serves in the interest of private companies or governments. In a way, this could be like a European way of dealing with digital data, maybe even a European social credit system, which includes the democratic usage of our digital data. So many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for your intervention. I'm surprised you were shorter than 15 or 16 minutes. That's great on one side, but I see a long comment of Jena. I would say, Jena, maybe you can take the word to ask, or well, yeah, let's do that way for this one, because we have I think a few minutes left. Oh no, just a second. Let me take a look. Well, go ahead, Jena.
Yes, thank you, Didier. And this was an interesting presentation. It seems that the asserted inevitability of the erosion of privacy discussed with data sharing would be an outcome not necessarily of the sharing of data, but rather of a collectivized system of universal health insurance where everybody has to participate. However, if medical care continues to be predominantly privately delivered, even if there are some government subsidies or funding mechanisms, but people have a choice to utilize them or not, then data sharing could still occur on an opt-in basis. Individual patients could decide to share their information if it is to their benefit or if they perceive it to be to their benefit. And the same with private medical care providers and institutions. They could opt into a data sharing mechanism. That data sharing mechanism could be open source. It could involve numerous patients and providers and still achieve similar benefits, but without the compulsory aspect. So if somebody doesn't feel comfortable sharing information about a health condition, they may opt to seek the services of a provider that doesn't participate in such networks, or just opt to withhold that particular information from whatever databases are created. Wouldn't you say that system is more compatible with all of the conceivable values that individuals could have, both in terms of freedom and privacy, as well as in terms of the benefits that could be derived from many patients sharing large amounts of information and researchers being able to glean insights?
Oh, this is a very good point, but I don't think so. And actually, the reason for me making this claim is sort of by simply comparing a system where we have not a universal or a public health insurance like in the United States, and the systems we have here in the European countries where we have a public health insurance system. And basically, just by comparing the two systems, we can see the advantages of having this public health insurance system, which is available to everyone. And the costs per capita in the United States are $900 per person in the average. In Europe, the cost per capita for health insurance less than half that high, about 400 euros, sometimes even lower than that. The outcomes of a systems, and we can see that with respect to the average life expectancy. The average life expectancy in the United States, it's a couple of years lower than in the various European countries. So it's in the middle of the 70s, where in Europe it's around 80s. It depends on the country, on the specific country. So it seems the advantages concerning, if we want to promote the health span of the entire city, of all the citizens, then the effects clearly seem to be in the advantage within an arrangement where we do have a public health insurance which is being available. I know, I'm aware of the advantages of such a private systems as we have them in the United States, because obviously if you have a very, very, very specific, very rare disease and you have the money, and that's the additional prerequisite, then the issue can be better treated, then you're a lot more likely to survive in the United States. So for these specialized cases. But for the majority of cases, it's better to have that public health insurance. And the question is here now, the costs for any kind of medical treatments are permanently increasing, and the costs need to be covered. So if we start from the premise that having health is such an important issue, and more than 90% of the population identify an increased health span, either intrinsically or instrumentally, with a better quality of life, then this is something that the state ought to take care of. And that is, I think, an extremely strong argument for a public health insurance. And once we have established this is the central argument, I think human beings have a great variety of different concepts of what a good life is like. But the one thing, most people share, and I'm not saying everyone, but the great majority share, is that an increased health span promotes their quality of life. And that's why I think a public health insurance is justified. But the challenge is to finance it, and collecting digital data and using it to at least partially cover for the public for the health insurance would be a way of exactly solving this issue.
Thank you, Stefan. So this was the last intervention before the debate. You have now 14 minutes to be precise to take a coffee, and then we will have this debate. I forgot that Ben Gertzel is in Hong Kong at the moment. It's there 3 a.m., so he will not be there for the debate for, I'm almost sure, for understandable reasons. So it was but I forgot that when organizing the debate. So please be back in 14 minutes for the debate.